Good evening, folks, or good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm here in downtown beautiful Toronto, Ontario. Thanks so much for joining us for our Finding and Applying for Scholarships webinar. It's incredibly popular session. We've got a lot of people signed up, and we've got a lot of people sort of coming through the doors, even as I speak. If you registered, you need to bail out. You can't stay for the whole thing. Or if you're just looking for a review, we will have a recording of the session available to anybody who registered. So we'll send that around a little later in the week. Otherwise, we certainly will have some time for questions. We've got about an hour this evening. So we'll go through the spiel. We'll take some questions at the end. And I'm also joined by my colleague Chris, who's in the chat. He'll be keeping an eye on the text. If you have questions that you just can't wait, feel free to drop them in the chat, and my colleague Chris will do his best to address them there. Otherwise, hang on till the end, and we'll do as many as we can. So by my clock, it's 7 p.m., 4 p.m. on the West Coast. I think we can dive into this thing. So thanks again for joining us, everybody, and let's get into it. Okay, quick intro and about us before I talk a bit about myself. Scholarships Canada is the main draw, but we have a handful of websites, Scholarships Canada being the main one, School Finder, Study in Canada, and Study and Go Abroad. All of these have slightly different audiences and aims. We'll talk a little bit about some of them, but the main one we'll focus on today is Scholarships Canada. And let's talk a bit about myself. I'll give you a quick intro. My name is Logan. I'm the editor here at Scholarships Canada, School Finder. A little bit about my academic history, because I have been through the ringer, as it were. Out of high school, I did a gap year where I worked and did some extra credits just for fun. I was really into filmmaking. And I went to film school at Niagara College, got an advanced technical diploma, very fancy, 3-year college degree diploma. And I worked as a video editor for several years. But I always knew that my temperament, my interests, I wanted the capital U university experience. I wanted to read and write and think deeply. So I sort of left my career as a video editor and began my career as a word editor with a little bit of extra education in between. I attended the University of Toronto here, beautiful downtown, to get an honors BA in linguistics, writing, and rhetoric. So I know a thing or two about words, I know a thing or two about scholarships, and I know a thing or two about tuition fees. Let me hang on for just a second.
Chat, there's some people that can't hear it. Do you want to just mention that is everyone hearing the audio?
Sure. Yeah, just got a plug from my colleague. Apparently some folks are having trouble hearing okay. I'll just take a look at the chat. Apologies. Yeah, some folks are saying it sounds fine. Okay, thanks, folks. So that suggests to me then it may be a sort of user side thing. One user is suggesting rejoining the app. So thanks everybody for chiming in. We won't spend too much more time on this. If you are having trouble with audio, probably a good idea to jump out of the webinar, jump back in, and you won't really miss anything. Plus, as I mentioned, we've got a recording. So thanks for that. Keep an eye open and an ear open. So let's talk a little bit about post-secondary education. So these stats are a little bit old. I'm meaning to update this slide, to be honest, but the basic idea is such that the more education you have, the more likely you are to earn money over the course of your career. So folks with a master's degree, their average income tends to be quite a bit higher than folks who don't have an equivalent high education. Now, there are some wrinkles here, especially with regards to the trades and certain sort of technical occupations. So take this as a bit of a grain of salt, but it is StatCan data. And the basic idea is true today as it was then, which is the more education you have, the more opportunities you have to earn money. But it's more than just earning cash. There's the idea that higher ed helps make you a more civically engaged, well-rounded person. Now, does higher ed self-select for these type of folks, or is it the education that is sort of instilling these community-minded ideas into folks? Probably a bit of both, really. But it's something to consider that going to school can actually make you more of a well-rounded person. So let's get into the meat of the matter. I just want to cover a couple of important terms that will be thrown around fairly casually through the rest of the session. Scholarship. So this is specifically related to grades and accomplishments. So you might think of being top of a class in your math course, so you get a scholarship for that. We also use the term scholarship as a very generic word. For example, in Scholarships Canada, we talk about bursaries and awards and grants and stuff too, but we just say scholarships as a sort of shorthand. And scholarships may be renewable. We'll talk a bit about what that means in a second. Bursary, by contrast, is all about financial need. So whereas a classic scholarship might be about your grades, bursary is more about the money that you don't have in your pockets. So a lot of students are going to have some kind of funding gap in their plans. It's hard to save enough to pay for it all outright. So a lot of folks are in financial need and thus eligible for bursaries. Okay, we'll cover awards. So again, this in its specific sense is very much about achievement, accomplishment. You might have been the football star for the year, so they give you the football award. We also use it as a sort of generic term. Awards generally are not renewable. We'll cover that set. And then a grant. A grant is often sort of more research level, kind of master's level and above. You might get a research grant to help you carry out a project. They're generally one-time support. They're often not renewable. So what do I mean by renewable? Essentially, a renewable scholarship is one that continues to fund you year in and year out. So for example, you come into first year and you get a $1,000 entrance scholarship, and it's renewable as long as you keep your grades up above 75%. So second year comes around, you did well in first year, you got that 75 plus. The school will give you another $1,000. The second year, it's renewable. So if you can find a renewable scholarship, that's really highly recommended. Make sure you keep your eligibility up so that you don't lose it. So how are you going to pay for school? This is some of the classic options. For most students, it's going to be a mix of all of these. Savings and work, if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you have a decent job and you can save. Family and parents, again, highly contextual. Do you have folks in your life who are in a position to save some coin for you? Do they like you well enough to share it? Loans, this is where a lot of students end up, myself included, back in the day. There are several different kinds. We won't get too into the weeds, but loans, short version, you have to pay them back. So any money you take from the bank or equivalent, you have to pay it back to them. Some caveats there. And then scholarships and bursaries. So that's what we're here to talk about. This is essentially free money, quote unquote. You do have to work for it. There's, in fact, a lot of sort of emotional and mental labor involved. We'll get into it. But this is where you want to be searching for most of the time, really. Where you want to be spending your time is looking for scholarships and bursaries. So $1,000 as a scholarship, sort of typical amount. Doesn't seem like a lot. Maybe it does, but when you think about a $7,000 or $8,000 tuition bill, $1,000 doesn't maybe seem like a lot. But at the same time, that could cover your textbooks. It could cover your transpo, your phone bill, your entertainment for the semester, and so on. And of course, you can stack these up. $1,000 here, $1,500 there, and you're starting to make a difference. So let's cover a few scholarship myths. These are misconceptions and sort of wrong ideas folks have. I don't have the marks. Disabuse yourself of that. In fact, a lot of the awards that we index on Scholarships Canada do not ask about your academic average. They're looking for other things, of which we'll talk about. Myth 2, lots of competition. This is a sort of yes and no kind of thing. A lot of admins, when we survey them every couple of years, a lot of them, more than half, say they want more applicants. And then a handful of scholarships every year go unclaimed because people are not actually applying for them. So These are often the sort of smaller ones, the weirder ones. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later too. Myth 3, only schools give scholarships. Definitely not true. Lots of awards come from what we call non-educational admins. This is places like corporations, associations, unions, religious orgs, etc. If it's a sort of public-facing organization, there is a non-zero chance that they will offer scholarships. Deadlines only in the spring, definitely not true. Awards happen throughout the year. In fact, we're seeing a bit of a bump in the summertime now. We see a bump in the spring, a bump in the fall. So there's sort of like peaks and valleys, but new awards come and go all the time. You'd be surprised how often new ones are launched and old ones are sort of mothballed. So there is a lot of churn in the calendar, which on one hand is positive because it means there's lots of new stuff to consider. On the other hand, it means you need to stay on top of this stuff. Myth 5, not in financial need. Only about a third of the awards we index ask about financial need at all. But of course, the counterpoint to that is most students probably are in financial need, have some gap in your funding. So here's just a quick recap. Forgive me for the check marks not quite aligned there properly, but won't get too into this. But the bottom one I want to highlight, you can't win if you don't apply. That is true. There is a bit of a sort of gambler's element to this, really, in the sense that if you think of like a part-time job, you're guaranteed to go in and be paid for that time. You put 10 hours into your part-time job, they'll pay you 10 hours. Scholarships, on the other hand, it might take you a few hours to apply and you might not receive the award. In fact, most people won't because there's only so many awards available, right? There are some that go unclaimed and so on, but for the majority, they get applicants. And if you don't put your time in, you're not going to be in that pool. So there's a bit of a sort of give and take there, and you want to be consistent. So the main takeaway that we try to encourage students is to see yourself as a scholarship recipient, somebody who is worthy, deserving, who warrants getting an award, right? We can often sort of self-talk ourselves into or out of things like, oh, I don't have the grades, I don't have enough volunteer hours, there's too much competition, blah, blah, blah. Easy enough to say, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve it. Try to disabuse yourself of that. Try to reframe your thinking. See yourself as somebody who is deserving. Okay, so let's take a quick inventory of a handful of interesting awards. I just want to give you a sense of the type of stuff that's out there. This is by no means exhaustive. We're talking tens of thousands of awards. We're just going to highlight 5. And then we'll talk about why these are interesting. So Fulbright Canada, this one's specifically for Canadian grad students who go to the USA. They've got a handful of different types. We won't get too into the weeds on them. But as you can see from the screen grab there, the award amount is nothing to sneeze at, 25K. That'd be USD too, so quite a bit more than Canadian. Scholarship 2, this one's pretty cool. It's new to me this year. Buddha's Light Young Adult Award. You don't have to be Buddhist by any means. Anyone 18 to 35 with 60% grade average is eligible to apply. They want an essay essentially talking about the 4 objectives of Buddhism and how that impacts you as a student. So stuff like education, charity, culture. So yeah, I thought that's pretty cool. 10 awards, $1,000 each. Can't beat it. Scholarship 3. Oh, I didn't change the screenshot. I apologize. But the ServiceScape scholarship, this stuff's true. It's a $1,000 USD prize. They want you to write about writing. So that's kind of cool. Just a short essay on how writing impacts the world. As a writer myself, I feel strongly about this. Now we've got the Jake White's Memorial Scholarship. This one's kind of cool too, because it is very focused on a particular program area. In the trades, which are becoming more and more popular. This one specifically automotive services, heavy duty mechanic, that's sort of like truck and car mechanic type of programs. If you're coming out of a Canadian high school, you are in financial need, you can apply. It's a $1,000 award. They have an optional 3 to 5 minute video. So this is kind of cool. You don't often see this being optional. So you can take a look at that if you're interested in automotive. And finally, this one's for international students. This one's kind of cool. It's from the University of Guelph Humber. They're a school here in Toronto. 75% admissions average to qualify for $8,500 each year. I believe maybe not renewable. So this one's great if you're coming to Canada. We'll talk about international scholarships a little later, but I just wanted to highlight, yes, they do exist. They are out there. So you are looking for awards, or you're thinking a little bit about how the heck am I going to find them? This is kind of where you want to start. Handful of factors, and we'll cover a few more. This is in rough order of import, sort of. Certainly field of study is a huge one. This is the program that you're either looking at going into or already studying. You may see a lot of action around sort of STEM awards these days, lots of funding for the sciences in general. We're starting to see trades as well, like the Jake Wheats one we saw just a minute ago. Excuse me. Conversely, there are fewer, in my experience, awards for stuff in the arts. Not to say they're not out there, but there just might be more competition. We're currently in a very sort of STEM forward period in our cultural history. So that's kind of reflected in the scholarships that are on offer. But that said, Opteris just closed this summer, and they had a $10,000 scholarship specifically for an arts student. So your field of study is a factor. What you're taking matters. When you're looking for awards, you want to think about keywords related to your field of study. So maybe you're in chemistry. You want to be looking for keywords like chem and STEM and chemical and whatnot, right? Like really basic stuff, but make sure you're thinking about these permutations. Year of study, this is a big one too. A lot of schools will sort of compete with one another to attract first-year students, especially. So they offer a lot of what they call entrance awards, which are meant for students who are coming straight out of high school into college or university. These entrance awards are often renewable, which is awesome. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then conversely, with year of study, it becomes a little bit more difficult the deeper into your program that you get. That's not to say there aren't awards for third and fourth year students. There are. There are even awards for people who are in their final year or that have already graduated, right? But there is less of that sort of school to school competition. So again, you want to be thinking about this renewability, especially early in your educational career. If you can find a renewable entrance scholarship, keep your grades up, whatever you need to do, that can set you off on a really good path. Lots of awards won't ask about your year of study at all, but a lot of them are specific for certain years. So keep that in mind. Activities. This is the classic sort of extracurricular. A lot of different items rolled into this. In the States, sports scholarships are a really big deal. Athletic scholarships, I'm getting a full ride to Penn State to play QB, right? This is much less common in Canada. We do have awards for athletes and sports people of all kinds, of course, but we don't have the strong sports media empire stuff that the States has. So we have awards that are more focused typically on other factors, like what I call the big three, which is leadership, community involvement, and volunteering. Now, these are three prongs of the same fork, if you will. Leadership, for example, you don't need to be the president of your student council to demonstrate leadership. You just need to be somebody who is seen to be showing up, somebody who is clearly taking life by the horns, right? Somebody who's trying to help other people. And you might be able to demonstrate these leadership skills, build these skills in your community by volunteering, for example. Now, not everybody has the time or wherewithal to volunteer, so it's really going to depend. Part-time job is a good place to develop some of these skills as well. But if you are in a position to do so, volunteering in particular is a really great idea. Here in Ontario, and I'm sure it's true elsewhere, high school students require at least 40 hours of volunteer service to graduate. So that's great. That will get you off on the right start. But the raw number of hours that you have is less meaningful to scholarship admins than how the experience impacted you and how your experience impacted your community. So it's great if you did 100 hours of visiting the elderly at the retirement home. But it's better if you can talk about how spending time with Ethel got you to see the world in a new way and helped you develop a fresh perspective. So you always want to be sort of connecting your experience to the broader gestalt and less focused just on, oh, I did 100 hours, I did 200 hours, I'm so good, right? Otherwise, activities, yeah, think a little bit more specifically. Maybe we've called out sports here, but you might be thinking field hockey, ringette, think about your hobbies. Okay, academic average. This is your most recent grades. We won't belabor this. A lot of admins, especially if you're going into sort of first year, college, uni, will be looking at grade 11 grades. Grade 12 might not be ready yet, so just keep that in mind, but don't worry too much. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. More factors. Heritage. So this is, you either are or aren't, basically. In Canada, we have a lot of awards for Indigenous students, folks who might have a Métis heritage, Inuit, whatever else. But we see all sorts of other backgrounds for Chinese students, Polish students. I've seen Netherlands, I've seen Sweden. Wherever you're from, there may well be a scholarship for you. Affiliation. This one's kind of interesting. This is stuff like the company you might work for if you have a part-time job. If you're a member of a union, you belong to a religious organization, that kind of thing. I'll highlight just a personal story here for a bit of context. When I was coming up, I worked part-time at a No Frills stocking shelves. So No Frills is a Loblaw company, and Loblaw's offered scholarships to student employees. So there was one vector right there. It was also a union shop, and the union that I was in, UFCW, offered scholarships. So that was two. Then my dad worked for Coca-Cola in Hamilton, Ontario, and they offered awards. So that was a third. And then his union also offered scholarships to like the kids of union members. So that was four distinct opportunities I had just by virtue of my part-time job and my dad's full-time job at the time. So do think a little bit about your own affiliation is the word, and think about your immediate family as well. So that means mom and dad. In the case of the military, it will often mean grandma, grandpa as well. But usually they're not interested in like aunt and uncle, cousin, roommate twice removed kind of stuff. Okay, personal circumstance. This is indelible things that maybe you couldn't change even if you wanted to. Stuff like LGBTQ, of course. If you were in the foster child system, maybe you're a single parent, whatever. Lots of these little circumstances have an award or two attached to them. Financial need, we talked about. Location. This one is sort of two-prong as well, in that some municipalities, small towns, might offer a scholarship to somebody who's leaving town to go to school. So I've seen those where $1,000 from the town of Chatham, for example. May also matter where you attend. So some awards are only for students who are going to school in Western Canada, for example. And maybe you grew up in Calgary, but you leave Calgary to go to school in New Brunswick. Okay, you're out of luck. So do think a little bit about the location, both where you're from and where you're actually studying. Great. Featured scholarships. So doing all of this sort of personal inventory, this can be tricky, excuse me. So we have featured scholarships. It's maybe about a dozen or so at any given time. Different things, scholarships, diaries, surveys, whatever. Just different ways to earn some cash. So you can check them out on Scholarships Canada. But we also have the tech to help you get matched. So this is a sort of algorithmically driven tech, I guess. I'm sort of showing my lack of technical knowledge, but the basic idea is that you set up a sort of social media-esque profile and you get asked a bunch of questions around some of the stuff we just talked about. Oops. Like your heritage and your personal circumstances, your activities, and so on. It's going to ask you all that stuff. And then it's going to spit out a list of awards that match you in some way or another. So you can see a screenshot here. It's not very high quality, but essentially it's a list of awards with some details, the value, the deadline, and etc. You'll also be asked about subscriptions. So there's lots of good ones here, but the main one I want to highlight is the scholarship deadline alert. This is a monthly email that highlights a handful of awards for you that you may want to consider. Your matching scholarships. Yeah, so we talked about those. Finding and refining. So this is pretty straightforward, but Scholarships Canada, it's like any site, like Amazon, if you will, you can sort of filter and whatnot. Won't spend too much time there. You can browse by categories. This is fairly new. If you know you're looking for arts awards or engineering awards, we've tried to sort of categorize them for simplicity. You can try that. So other than using Scholarships Canada, we'll talk a bit about actual advice. So getting motivated, this one's tricky. I alluded to it at the top. You know, a part-time job's for sure going to pay you. A scholarship application is a little bit more of a gamble, but it is a sort of legwork type thing. Think of it like trying to get shredded at the gym or cram for a difficult exam. You can't do it overnight, frankly, right? It takes a little bit of time over time. So that gets to the second point here. A few hours per week's a bit ambitious, I will admit, but the idea of coming back and checking in and putting in the hours here and there, that's what I really want to stress. Just popping in, saying, this, that, and the other, no, don't care, I'm out. It's not really going to help you, right? You need to be sort of persistent. Scholarships Canada, we try to help with deadline alerts and keeping your profile updated. And then understanding the requirements. All of the listings have the requirements. So when in doubt, it's a good idea to reach out to the admin. So let's talk a little bit about boilerplate documents. One of the best ways to set yourself up when the right scholarship appears in front of you and you only have a few days left to apply is to have your materials ready. So we call them boilerplate. Essentially, that's a basic template. And a lot of scholarship apps have a lot of overlap in that they want a handful of items like a resume. So one-page CV, read a lot of resumes in my day. We don't want a sprawling textbook, right? We want something punchy and to the point. Personal statement to that effect is similar. We'll talk about that in a second. And then references. You want to have a couple of reference letters handy. 2 is a good number. You may even want 3. Having one from a sort of academic source, maybe a teacher, professor, instructor, and then one from a slightly more personal source, like maybe an employer or a volunteer supervisor. That's a good idea. A little bit of a breadth. What you don't want to do, though, is get your mom and dad or your best friend to write it. Yeah, it should be somebody who knows you in a more professional context, even if that is at school. So let's talk about the personal statement. So this is a rough overview of how you can sit down this evening and knock out a compelling personal statement. So it sounds easy, but it's going to require you to do some thinking, and what I think of as a personal inventory, really. You want to try to address 4 basic questions. The first is, who are you? What's your background? What are you about, right? Who are you? I could give you a sort of 15-second pitch on who I am, and that's sort of how I define myself. You want to lay that out in a punchy, compelling way. Next, what are your goals? So this should be rolled in and ideally kind of connected to your studies somehow, or maybe your extracurriculars. Why are you doing what you're doing, essentially, right? You're applying for the award because you need money to pay for school, sure, but why are you going to school? What do you hope to achieve? What do you hope to learn? Yeah, what are you wondering about? That's kind of what we're trying to get at. Where are you headed? What the award means to you. So how will, if you're chosen as the recipient, how would that impact you? Would it mean more time to volunteer? Would it mean you could finally do that research project you've been wondering about? Like, how would it positively impact you? and think about that as well in relation to your community. So you're receiving a scholarship doesn't affect only you, it has ramifications on the people around you. That's your little sister, your mom and dad, whomever, right? They are proud of you, of course, and they're also kind of looking up to you. The people in around you are seeing you as somebody who received a scholarship. And so what does that mean for them, right? Try to put yourself in their shoes. You want to think about how you as a unit, as an individual, receiving this scholarship funding, how are you going to make a positive impact on the world at large? That's kind of what you want to get at in your personal statement. Now, you want to try to do all this in about 500 words. It's probably going to be challenging. So start, right? Start writing. If you get 1,000 words, all the better. Cut it down. Show it to other people, get feedback, right? The more sort of polished you can get this, the better. Now, all that said, some scholarships are not going to want to know what your goals are. Some will want to know about how writing impacts the world, for example. And maybe you can connect that to your goals and who you are and your background and whatnot, right? You want to be very clever about it, but you also want to be responsive to the prompt. So make sure you are reading the instructions, of course, but a lot of time, this personal statement basic kind of stuff will get you a good way there. So I think we covered this. Scholarships Canada. Yeah, we're on Instagram and whatnot. Don't worry about that too much. School Finder, I'll give you a quick plug here. If you have a Scholarships Canada account, School Finder is the sister site. It's specifically for finding schools and programs as opposed to scholarships. So it depends where you are in your search. But School Finder is pretty good as well, of course, and has lots of events and advice. Speaking of events, we have them coming up. We are at a webinar. I'm going to plug an event a little later. But let's go through some scholarship FAQs. And these buttons are a little wonky, but the question is, when should I apply? So we'll take your questions in just a few minutes, but I wanted to cover some of these that we constantly get, and we'll just get them out of the way. So when should I start applying for scholarships is a question we get all the time. Basically, you should start applying once you've got an offer of admission. That's not to say you can't start doing your research, start doing your digging to figure out what is available ahead of time. Maybe you figure out what schools you want to apply to based on their scholarship offerings. It's a great way to kind of nail down the right school, let them compete for you, right? What kind of scholarship funding can you offer me? Oh, well, school X is offering this, and can you match it or whatever, right? You can do a little negotiation almost. But in most cases, to apply for awards, certainly those that are offered by non-educational admins, is to have an offer of admission. Maybe you should accept it, or at the very least have it, to show that, yes, I am going to post-secondary education. I am going to George Brown College. Once you have that acceptance in hand, you should be good to start applying for most awards. Words for people in the trades. Yeah, so I've touched on this a little bit. They do exist. They're not as common. They seem to be growing a little bit. You want to be looking at certificate and diploma level scholarships, keeping an eye out for the words like apprentice. Yeah, and that's kind of the long and short of it. The Schulich Builders just started the last couple of years, and this is an amazing program specifically for people in the trades. So if you're interested in working in a trade, it's like a $20,000 to $40,000 a year scholarship for folks in Ontario to combat the shortage of tradespeople. So in general, you can imagine that when we start seeing a skills shortage, we should start seeing scholarships come in to sort of rectify that. So yes, the trades do have funding, and it's becoming perhaps more available now than ever. Next up, how many awards can I apply to and receive? Now, the beauty of this is there's no functional limit. Most admins won't really care if you have a scholarship from somebody else. The difference being, if a given organization offers a couple of awards, you probably can't win them both. But in most cases, you get them from different sources, it's all good. That's what you want to do, really. Most of the time, it won't affect it. What are the highest value awards available? So Canada doesn't have too many full ride awards where your tuition, residence, and everything is covered, but we do have some pretty major ones all the same. I've highlighted some of them here. Loran's a good one, TD Scholarships for Community Leaders, and the Schulich Leader Scholarships are some of the biggest value awards here in the country. They are also correspondingly competitive, but it's a place to look if you're really focused on dollar value over everything. And then there's the Schulich Builders too that I just mentioned about the trades, which is related to the Schulich Leaders. Okay, can I defer a scholarship if I need to? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. It really depends. To defer essentially means being selected as the recipient of the award, but choosing not to attend school in advance and then coming back to receive your award a little later. So it really depends on the award. You'll want to contact the admin to find out if you're considering deferring. And then scholarships for international students. So we get this a lot as well. An international student is somebody who is pursuing higher ed in a country that is not their own. So if somebody comes here from India or China are classic examples, they would be international students here in Canada. Conversely, if I went to study in India, I would be an international student there. So in short, there are awards for international students, but they are less common and more competitive than those for what we call domestic students. And often these awards are really interested in grades. They might be interested in your program of study as well, but they're often a little bit more grades focused than the leadership, community service, volunteer kind of stuff we talked about earlier. So not to dissuade you, they are out there for sure, but you just got to be pretty dedicated to find them and perhaps have a little bit of luck as well. So next steps, if you are thinking about, okay, what do I do next, right? If you're in grade 11 right now, or 10 even, you want to focus on your CV, your resume. This is stuff like we talked about earlier, which is, of course, your grades. Higher grades are always better. So if you can get them up, all the better to you. But it's also stuff like volunteering and showing a leadership role, right? Maybe you started your high school's anime club because you wanted to watch anime with your pals. That demonstrates leadership, right? You stepped up and saw a gap and filled it, right? So yeah, think about how you can volunteer or work part-time or develop your resume and develop your personality too, right? Your character as a human being. Grade 12, you're starting to look for actual applications. Entrance awards, as I mentioned, are number one, especially if you're coming right out of high school. You're looking for renewable entrance awards. And you're also, of course, applying for schools. I mean, the whole college and university application process is a different can of worms, and that's what schoolfinder.com is for, to kind of help you there. But it can be challenging. So another good piece of advice is to talk to students at the school that you're interested in. Not only will they know stuff about the vibe and the program offerings and whatever, they'll also perhaps know about scholarship opportunities. You never know. So when in doubt, reach out. If you're already in college or university, it's a little bit more challenging. Good advice here is to get involved with clubs, campus societies. Again, it's the sort of volunteer idea. But clubs and these societies can often offer scholarships, even if they're not huge. And another good thing to do is check with your financial aid office. Now, almost every school is going to have one, probably pretty well staffed. And yet a lot of students don't actually take time to book a session with the financial aid people. And they're going to be the ones who really know what the school has to offer. And they may know of stuff outside the school as well. So definitely check in with your financial aid folks. And finally, you may also want to converse with your department head, depending on your program. Some departments, like the English department, might offer a scholarship to the top English student every year. You never know. So yeah, check out some of the staff as well, your instructors. Just bend their ear, see what they know. Okay. This is an unrelated event plug. We are running a couple of in-person fairs. You can use this enormous QR code to register. We're in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary through the back half of October. So that I would encourage you to consider. That brings us to the end of our presentation and gives us about 20 minutes for questions. So I'm going to put this plug back on the screen just in case anybody's interested in this QR code. And otherwise, I will check the chat. If you have questions, drop them in, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. Otherwise, I want to thank you for your time, folks, this evening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and let's see how we can answer some questions. Okay. Okay, there's quite a few in here, so I will take some from about 7:30. Are there scholarships through Scholarships Canada that can be used for US schools? Yeah, I mean, in short, yes. It's not our focus as a site. We're mostly focused on schools here in Canada, but we do index some awards for folks who want to go to the States. And in fact, some states like Florida have agreements in place with Canada to make tuition cheaper. So keep an eye out for that kind of thing too, if you're trying to figure out where you want to go. Does that mean all these awards have a deadline in October? No, there are deadlines all throughout the year. Yes. Aren't scholarships a token of university or college acceptance? One of the main reasons for gaining a scholarship to build a solid application. How come we're applying before our offers? Yeah, I would say you generally want to apply for awards after you've got your offer. Winning a scholarship does look good on a CV or a scholarship or a job application or whatever, right? Or if you're going into grad school, having a couple of scholarships on your CV does look good, but it's not the main reason you should be applying, I would say. Okay, how can I apply for awards in the US as a Canadian? Yeah, we kind of talked about that. Studying abroad, basically the same idea. Yeah, a lot of countries are trying to encourage international students. Some schools will have maybe 1 or 2 awards specifically for Canadians. They will maybe offer scholarships just for international students in general. So keep an eye out for that. Are there scholarships available for grade 11s? This is a popular question too. Short answer, yes, but not many. Some awards are explicitly age-bound, where they might be open to anybody 16 plus or whatever. Some scholarships will specifically say they're open to high school students. Those are the minority, I would say. Most awards do expect you to be in post-secondary. So keep an eye out. They do exist, but there's just not that many. How should I get a teacher to send a reference letter? Should I get them to send it directly to the organization when I apply for it? Great question. Probably what you want is to have a copy of the letter handy. Not only will you be using it for scholarship apps, but you might want it for your job applications as well. Like having reference letters in general is a good thing. So if the teacher is willing to make it sort of general and let you have a copy, I'd say that's probably the best bet. Some scholarship admins may want the reference sent directly to them, so make sure you read the instruction. How come we're applying for scholarships after we apply for university? Yeah, it's a good question. Basically because scholarships are funding for post-secondary. And if you end up not going to college or university, then there is no real reason to get the scholarship, right? So it can be tough, especially if you're kind of hoping on scholarship funding to help you pay for the actual school. But that's the way it's set up, sorry to say. Student has dual citizenship for Canada and the US. Are you Canadian? Yeah, yeah. If acceptance letters don't come for a while, how can we apply for scholarships? Yeah, no, it is tough. Your best bet really is to start looking and indexing the material that you know you want to apply for. In some cases, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? We've even been admin on some awards where students will say, hey, you know what? I didn't get my letter of acceptance yet. I know it's coming, but I wanted to apply because of the deadline, and I'll send it as soon as I have it. that's kind of okay in some cases. So, if you have to kind of bend the rules a little bit, you might be forgiven. But how does the timeline translate for Quebec students who do CEGEP instead of grade 12? Should they be applying in their second year of CEGEP? Yeah, that's a great question too. It's really going to depend if you're going to school in Quebec or outside of it as well, how CEGEP is going to interact with it. I would say, especially if you're looking at schools outside of Quebec, you probably want to start looking, grade 12 rather than CEGEP time. But yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to kind of do some more digging on that to have a better answer next time. And if anybody on the call has thoughts on that, let me know. How often do new awards come on, and do they only appear on one scholarship platform company? Oh, okay, good question. I would say we add maybe a dozen or more every week. Yeah, that's probably about the right pace. New stuff comes into our inbox, comes across our desk. We see it in the news and we add it. Some awards will only appear on sites like Scholarships Canada. Sometimes they are across all the platforms. So as a savvy student, you probably want to be using as many different platforms as you can. Okay, are there any tips on spotting an illegitimate scholarship offer? I like this question. It's not one we get often. Um, I'm gonna make a note here too. But the basic idea is you don't want to be in a position where you're expected to pay money to participate, essentially. I have seen one or two awards where maybe it's kind of legit because there's a fee for entrance or whatever, but anytime you're expected to either pay money or like recruit other people, I would be wary of that. And that's what I'd be looking for. Most scholarships should be free to apply, and they shouldn't expect you to do really anything but apply. They might want you to follow on social media or whatever, like that's fair game, I guess. But uh, you shouldn't really need to ever pay them money. You shouldn't be expected to like refer your friends or anything like that. And if others have ideas about how to spot illegitimate scholarship offers, I'd be all ears because I find that an interesting question. Scholarship next steps for mature students. Yeah, this is a good one too. We get a lot of questions like this from mature students. And it's tricky because there are awards for mature students, and it's often using that keyword, but there's not that many. And a lot of awards are sort of age bound as well. So I would say as a mature student, you really want to be talking to the financial aid office, as I mentioned, for current students. Be reaching out to different schools, let them kind of compete for you, as I mentioned. Um, can't think of any mature student awards offhand. I know they exist, so I'd just be looking for those and trying to get in touch with financial aid departments. If you can talk to current mature students at the School of Interest too, they might have leads for you on funding that they enjoyed last year. Maybe you'd be eligible for this year. But yeah, mature students is tough. Will you send the recording? Definitely. If I apply for awards specific to a program and decide not to do the program, what happens? Well, you really won't be eligible for the scholarship at that point. You may be able to defer. You may just straight up no longer be in contention and they go to the next person on the list. Whenever or when in doubt, reach out. The info to contact the admins should be on the page. So I'd ask them. But yeah, rule of thumb, you probably wouldn't be eligible. Where can I apply for Guelph University? I mean, uh, the short version is it's the Ontario University's Application Center. It's an online portal where you can apply to any Ontario university, and other provinces have their own versions for BC, whatever else. Okay. Some scholarships require uploading a pic of a passport. What happens if I don't have one? That's curious to me. I haven't personally seen any scholarships that require a passport photo, so I'd be a little skeptical of that, to be honest. If you have the link, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at that later to learn a little bit more. But yeah, I've seen thousands of awards, and I've never seen somebody say you must have a copy of your passport to apply. So um, curious about that. Is there a francophone version of Scholarships Canada? That's a good question. In short, no. You could let your browser use an auto translate, I suppose. I'm not aware of any competitors or similar platforms that are French specifically. Um, but if they're out there, I'd love to know about it. Can you apply for awards prior to applying to uni? We talked about that. In short, kind of no. Elaborate more on the timeline of when to apply. Would it be after we apply for universities, after we get accepted, etc.? Yeah, in short, you'll generally want to at least have applied for university or college before you start applying for scholarships. Now you can start researching what awards you're interested in. You can do that anytime, of course, but to actually start your application, you probably want to have applied at least. Scholarships for mature students, absolutely. Some kind words from Jack. Thanks for that. Any scholarships for high school students, grade 11 or 12? Yeah, mentioned this earlier. Yes, but not many. Most are aimed at post-secondary. How to tell if an award is legitimate or not? Yeah, we talked about this as well. Don't pay money to apply, in short. And how to do well in a tell me about yourself style essay question. Yeah, so this we talked about pretty heavily in the personal statement basics page here. In short, you want to talk about who you are, your goals, and how receiving the award would impact you and your community. Scholarships for students in elementary or middle school. This is an interesting one. I don't know that I've ever really seen that. Maybe stuff like tuition discount at a private school kind of thing, but in general, no, not that I'm familiar. Okay, as a grade 12 student, I've heard a lot about the Rutherford Scholarship. Is it true that it's a guaranteed scholarship based on academic success? Yes, I believe so. I don't have the details handy, but the Rutherford Scholarship's for Alberta students, so you've got to be in Alberta to be eligible. And I believe it is just like, I think $1,500 based on your grades, or it might vary by amount depending on your academics. But yeah, the idea of awards that are guaranteed, which means you don't need to apply so long as you qualify, they are out there. And I believe Rutherford is a popular one in that category. Can mature students or those fresh out of high school still apply for college and go in later terms? I'm going for winter term for my first year. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, some schools will have essentially like a scholarship application period. So it really is going to depend on how the school you're attending sets it up. Some will have awards specifically for the winter term, for example. Um, so yeah, you'll probably want to talk to your financial aid office. In general, you should still be eligible for awards, but it might be a slightly different list. Are we getting the recording? Yes, for sure. How do I find scholarships that I want to study in a different country, not only the US? Yeah, so depending on the country you want to go to, it might actually get pretty hard. Scholarships Canada, we're focused mostly on Canada, some USA, some UK, a little bit of Australia. Other than that, you're going to need to start digging. I don't know how you would find like scholarships for Singapore, for example. I know Canada, the federal government does offer some scholarships for Canadian students who are going to be international elsewhere, but they're often at the graduate level. So if you're going abroad for your master's, you may be eligible for some funding. You'd have to kind of look at that, but really depends on what country. And I'm not familiar with like a scholarshipsindia.com, for example. Okay, how can one get a scholarship for industrial millwrights at New Brunswick Community College? Any idea how to tailor the research because opportunities are in Ontario? Not sure I totally understand. Couple different parts here. Industrial millwright, of course, is a precision trade. So it's a Red Seal skilled trade. So you'll want to be looking for stuff like that. New Brunswick Community College is a small school. They will offer awards, and I'm sure they have one for tradespeople. But otherwise, yeah, it's small schools, so it might be tough. And then how to tailor the research because opportunities in Ontario. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that, Daniel. If you can rephrase, maybe I can get back to it. Scholarships for carpentry. Yeah, again, basically Short form, yes. I don't have any offhand, but I've definitely seen them. General sort of construction trades, specifically carpentry, they are out there. Yeah. Dual citizenship, we talked about. Scholarships for students going into commerce, finance, and business. This is highly, highly competitive these days. There are business scholarships out there, but they are, yeah, like I say, quite competitive because a lot of people are in business programs. I don't have anything offhand to recommend, but yeah, I would be looking early, to say the least. Are entrance awards only for high school grads going to post-secondary? Are they sometimes for first years? Yeah, it's a good question. Entrance awards, quote unquote, are technically for straight out of high school type students. Some schools will consider any sort of first year application to be an entrance award, but as a strict definition, entrance generally means straight out of high school, straight into college or uni. Do you think part-time academic upgrading as a mature student would count for eligibility? I would say academic upgrading programs of all kinds are generally not eligible for scholarships. They might have a small fee attached and not make you eligible. So if you're just trying to improve your eligibility, I would say academic upgrading probably not the best call. Some awards are requesting a transcript, not a report card. As a student who's finished grade 11, how do you obtain one? Are there fees involved? Yeah, so you'll just need to talk to your high school office, really. When you're in grade 11, grade 12, you should be able to go to the receptionist and just say, hey, I need a copy of my transcript for a scholarship application. How much turnaround time do you need? I don't think your high school will charge you for a transcript. Some colleges and universities might, like when you graduate U of T, for example, if I wanted U of T to get me a transcript, they might charge me 20 bucks for it, but I don't think your high school will. So you should just be able to get it, really. Just ask them. Do scholarships often respond if you have not received the award? Yeah, it's interesting. Can't speak for how most people do it, but from what I've seen, generally they'll announce the winner and they'll want to publicize that. So you may hear back via email saying, hey, congrats to so-and-so. If it's a scholarship application through the school that you're interested in, you may not hear back. But other sort of companies and unions and stuff, you probably will hear back. You may even see like a, yeah, congratulations so-and-so article on social media or whatever. Template for the resume, I don't have one on handy, but you want to be looking for what they call a functional or skills-based resume. Use that keyword, that should get you. More detail on grade 11 to prepare or direct me to a helpful source. Yeah, Scholarships Canada does have some articles to that effect. If you search grade 11 in the Discover bar, you should find some stuff that will help. Basically, though, in grade 11, you are shoring up your resume, your personal character, and your work experience, your volunteer, your leadership skills, your community experience, right? You want to be somebody who is not just a bump on a log. Okay, second year, as a second year master's students, when are you no longer eligible for scholarships? After convocation? Yeah, that's interesting. If you're in your second year of a 2-year master's, some awards are open to graduating students, people who are either finishing or have just finished. So in theory, you might be eligible for that kind of stuff. If you're going on to further study, you may still be eligible. But yeah, once you've graduated, essentially, in most cases, you're no longer eligible. Do I have to create a profile on the site to be considered for automatic consideration scholarships? No. Automatic consideration means that when you apply to, for example, Guelph Humber, you apply to be a student there. They will look at your application and they may say, hey, you know what? This person qualifies for award X, and thus they give it to you. You don't have to do anything. Those are the best. What time for grade 12 student to apply after applying to college or uni? Can you use your siblings' jobs? Probably not. For like parents' job, yes. Siblings' job, probably not. High school grades, if you're in your first year of uni, yeah. Scholarships Canada's got some broken links and outdated info. That is true. Yeah, it's a massive database and it's hard to keep it up to date. We do our best. We've got a team of folks constantly triaging it, but it is a challenge. We try to keep it open as possible to give you a sense of the breadth of opportunity, but there is a bit of legwork on your side as well, unfortunately. Um, Out of school, can I apply for awards in my first year? Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. Uh, International entrance scholarships, the only type of award an international student can apply to. No, I mean, you'll be open to anything that's open to an international student is fine. Entrance is just something you want to keep an eye out for. What should I do if I have questions later on? That's a great question. I'm going to send around the recording, and I think I might include a little like feedback form to drop a few extra questions. And so we'll try to roll those into an FAQ document or something. And you can also give me a shout at info@scholarshipscanada.com. Send us an email over there, and we'll try to get to you. On Scholarships Canada, what's the difference between a mature student and a student? Yeah, it's literally just a tag, try to help us match you, really. There's no like meaningful difference. It's just a different classification, if that makes sense. I have dual citizenship. Can I apply for Canadian scholarships for USA schools? I was researching and it stated you cannot be a USA citizen. Okay, well, I mean, if you read the rules and it says you can't be a US citizen, then whatever the rules say in any given case is what's going to be true. In most, if you have a dual citizenship, though, that should, in my mind, make you eligible for scholarships for Canadian students, right? Canadian and the inverse, but depends on the rules, I guess. Should I still apply to scholarships from unis that aren't my first choice? Yeah, let them compete for you. Let them try to woo you, right? How do you go about applying to Loran? Loran's tough because it requires a nomination, actually. It's not even a direct application. Somebody has to say, hey, you know what, Emily would make a good applicant. So you'll generally want to be in touch with your like guidance counselors, teachers, those kind of people. Scholarships awards for ADHD students. Yeah, there are a couple. I don't know how up to date they are on Scholarships Canada. There is also disabilityawards.ca. It's a popular one, specifically for folks in sort of that category. Will the recording include the questions? Yes, indeed. The event plug QR code's not working. Oh no, I tested it. Okay, apologies. You can go to studyandgoabroad.com to check that out. Should the boilerplate document be attached to every scholarship application as well as the prompt requested by the admin? No, no. You only want to use those boilerplate documents for material where it makes sense. If the prompt is different or not related, respond to the prompt. Can you only apply to awards for schools that you were going to? Yes. So there are awards from non-educational admins where you can take them wherever. But if the award is offered by the University of Calgary, you need to attend the University of Calgary to receive it. Otherwise, they're not going to fund students elsewhere. Thanks for putting that study and go abroad.
Hello, I think my colleague Logan has been bumped offline. I will try to pick it up where he left off until he comes back.
Hey, I think I am back. Apologies.
Okay, great. No worries. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm out of school and applying for my first year. Could I still apply for scholarships for my first year? Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're going into first year. You may not be eligible for all entrance awards, as we discussed, but depending on your school, you may still. Okay. Oh, and somebody mentioned Rutherford. You automatically get it if you have an average over 80% in Alberta. Thanks for that clarification. Okay. Oh, and here's the passport scholarship. Thank you. I'm going to take a look at this. And let's see. Came in late, don't know how to get a reference letter. In short, you want to talk to teachers, volunteer coordinators, coach, your boss, those kind of people. Oh yeah, and Chris dropped some info on that as well in the chat. There are some awards for people in grade 12 applying in October, but most scholarships offered by universities are for those students who have already started their first year. Yes, I'd say that is fair to say. So a given school might, let's say they offer 100 awards. 80 of those 100 might be for students who are already enrolled, and 20 might be for people who are coming into first year. So yeah, I mean, you'd be eligible depending on what year you're in, really, right? Okay, covered that. Kids in BC. Oh, okay. So Deanna's dropped some info on awards, I guess, for sort of elementary school students. So that's pretty cool. Do you need to take the SATs when applying to a college or uni in the USA? Really depends on the school. A lot of them are test optional. You'll have to check their sites, but in a lot of cases you don't. Apply to awards from unis that aren't my first choice. Yeah, let them compete. Should we rush for early applications or consider our grades later around December before applying? That's an interesting question. In general, there's no real reason to rush a scholarship application. You're not going to be more considered, if you're first than if you're last. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Okay, nursing program specific scholarships for sure, for sure. And aviation, yes, absolutely. There are scholarships for those. How many can you apply to at once? As many as possible. Some more kind words from some people, so thanks for that, everybody. Yeah, no limit. Any scholarships that are automatic? Yes, so we did cover a couple in our quick inventory. On Scholarships Canada, any automatic scholarship will not have an apply now button. It may have a learn more button. And then on school websites, they will generally say automatic or no application required. I can't think offhand what the percentage of automatic awards is, but I would say it might be 5 or 6% even. It might be quite a few. I should look into that. Okay, I want to go for nursing. Should I apply for an entry scholarship related to medical studies? Yeah, I mean, sure. Nursing, you'll find awards specifically for nursing, and then you'll find other awards for people in healthcare, in the medical field, right? So in either case, just apply for the ones that make sense. Do I know if Rutherford has a deadline? Rutherford is automatic, so I don't think there's a deadline involved. I believe as long as you apply to college or uni and you have that 80%, you should be fine. The passport ones for international students, that kind of makes sense. I will take a look at that and do a little bit of digging. I'm interested in it. It's from St. Lawrence College, so that's encouraging. They're a legitimate school, at least. I'll have more info on that a little later. And then finally, how do you turn on notifications for scholarship deadlines? It's a part of your Scholarships Canada account. So if you hit scholarshipscanada.com, and it's at the very end of your profile setup. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a subscription status. It's called Scholarship Deadline Alerts. And we got another question about BC. Is there a sort of Rutherford equivalent for BC? It's a really great question, and in fact, kind of makes me want to inventory what are the Rutherford alikes for all the provinces, right? I don't know offhand for BC or anybody else. Rutherford is a little bit unique, but I suppose there may be equivalents. More data needed. It's a great question. I'll have to take a look. Are there applications for unis are in January, but lots of scholarships have deadlines in October. What should I do? Yeah, it's tough. You want to pretty much be looking year round. If you apply in January, I mean, January is the deadline, right? You could conceivably apply earlier. But you might be thinking the year ahead, right? You kind of want to be thinking 12, 18 months ahead. Yeah, still confused on where to go. That's why I'm talking about nursing and medical studies. Yeah, sorry, Danny. I'm not a nursing or medical expert, obviously. So I only have a sort of rough idea. Um, schoolfinder.com might be the site for you if you're trying to actually compare schools and programs. You can line them up one to one and see, okay, this one costs X, but this one's requirements are Y. That can help you. And then once you get down to a short list of schools and programs that you're considering, then you can start comparing their scholarship offerings. But yeah, it starts to be a little bit challenging, especially if you're in a very sort of technical field like nursing. Scholarships for aviation to the US. I do know of some Canadian aviation awards. I'm not sure of any for Canadian students in the States. They might be out there, but you'd have to do some digging. The BCTESG one, thanks for that clarification. What to avoid when writing applications? Avoid AI, generative AI. Sometimes you can't tell, obviously, and sometimes you can tell. And when you can tell, at least from my point of view and others I've talked to, other admins, nobody really likes it. What we want from a personal statement is you. So avoid giving us somebody else's words. Give us your words, your personality. Any advice on finding local scholarships that are more specific or less competitive? Yeah, I'd be looking around like local businesses. You might even be able to ask them if they don't offer an award, like why not, kind of thing. And you also want to be looking for lower value awards. So stuff that's like $700 instead of 7,000, right? And try on some of the ones that are weird, like the duct tape scholarship stuck on prom. How to, yeah, so generally finding local scholarships is tough for sure. I would be searching for keywords like your town, your region. Yeah, that's a tough one for sure. There is a read on Scholarships Canada. Each of the listings has a sort of monthly interest, monthly views counter. So if it's like super high, that'll give you a sense that a lot of people are interested in this one. If it's super low, that'll give you a sense that it's not all that popular. So that might be helpful as well. Find scholarships through parents' workplace. Literally just got to ask them. They might be handing posters out, check the break room, that kind of thing. I found out via poster personally. And now let's, yes, okay. How many can you apply for? As many as you apply for. Thank you, Claire. You nailed it. Isabel has clarified about Rutherford too. I'm getting schooled here. I appreciate that. Anytime people in the chat can answer questions in the chat, I love it. That said, I guess we are quite a bit over time. It is certainly night here in Toronto, and it's getting into the afternoon across the country. So I think we'll leave it here for today, but I'll send the recording out as well, of course. We'll try to get a little bit of feedback and some extra questions, and maybe we'll follow up on some of these brain twisters. But otherwise, thanks so much for your time, folks. Really do appreciate you taking some of your afternoon or evening out with us, and we'll see you again soon.